Welcome to Let's Be Well Together podcast. We're your wellness check-in team. We talk about different categories of wellness and seeking balance between them. There's overview info on our website, letsbewelltogether.com.
This is episode 44.
We hope our territorial acknowledgement improves allyship with Indigenous people within a reconciliation process. We're on the Haldimand Tract, located on the traditional territories of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples. We acknowledge the presence and traditional knowledge, laws, and philosophies of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land. It's another week of Let's Be Well Together podcast, and we have guest co-host Elise Seifert back, and we're continuing with her Elise's Travel series.
That's right. And this week we're hoping to talk about some of my experiences in Jordan.
Right. And you, again, remind me, you went there as part of your education.
I did. So I studied classics, so focusing on learning about ancient civilizations. And in particular, I focused on archaeology. So I was fortunate enough to go on an archaeological dig in Jordan.
Amazing. So how did that actually work? Like, what were you doing there?
Every day we would be on site. So we had a location that we were working at inside of a city center, actually. It was in Madaba, Jordan, which is close to the capital. And we would be there early, 5 a.m. till 1. And we would be digging in particular holes. And then in the afternoon, we would go through what we found, if anything. So often it was pottery. We were working on a site that was actually a series of homes. So my particular square had part of a home, the kitchen, and then a corridor between two homes.
And why would you go so early? Is it the heat or something?
It was the heat.
Okay.
We were there in July.
Oh, so how hot did it get?
Oh, it got into the 40s for sure. And the nice thing is it's not humid, so that was good. But if you were directly in the sunlight at, 40-degree temperatures, it was really hot. So we started early. And then we were done early, and then we had time to explore. And every weekend we would go on trips together throughout Jordan, and that was organized with the school.
And when you were digging, were you actually in the sun?
Yes, it was direct sunlight. So,
wow.
So it was...
At noon.
Yes, exactly. I think we took a lunch break around that time, or at least a snack break at that time, just for the heat. But we made sure we had lots of water, and we were fortunate to actually be in the city. I know of other digs that were kind of out in the desert. So we were lucky in that regard because we could run to the house that we were staying at quick, get some more water, and come back.
I always picture, for some reason, people using like toothbrushes or something. But did you use shovels? What'd you do?
We were supposed to bring our own trowels. So we all had trowels that we used. And we would just dig a little bit at a time. You would collect it into buckets. And then I guess everyone was kind of split into different roles. So sometimes you'd be digging. Sometimes you'd be transporting the buckets. Sometimes you'd be sifting. So you would transport the buckets to the sifter. They would sift out and take out anything that was worth keeping. So whether it was pottery, we found a really cool figurine inside of our kitchen area. And then we would also map.
Okay, so how many either days or weeks were you digging?
We were there for 4 weeks.
So 4 weeks. And did you find that little thing or did someone else?
So it was in our square, so that was exciting, but It was another person.
So you dig for 4 weeks. Did you find anything?
Well, we found where...
I mean you.
Me? No, I mean pottery. I found lots of pottery. And we found a wall, and so you're uncovering the wall, and then eventually you'd have to take the wall down so that you could continue digging some more. So we would map it and then take the wall down and then continue digging some more. So it was a really interesting experience. And then every Saturday we went on trips together, and I think that's where I talked to someone who was telling me about how they capture memories.
Right. And so what interested me and why I wanted to talk to you about this was because instead of taking snapshots through photos and whatnot, you met somebody who takes sound bites.
Yeah. So
what was that about?
He had a sound recorder. I think it was a digital sound recorder at that time. And both of us, we were at a castle. It was a castle from the Middle Ages that was placed there. And we were sitting kind of in a quiet spot together. Everyone else was exploring somewhere. And I kind of just wanted to go off and enjoy the site. And he was sitting there and he had his recorder and then he clicked it off. And I asked him, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I like to record sounds of the places that I visit." And I thought, kind of like, people take pictures. He records sounds. And he said that when he goes home, he can listen to the sounds again and it just transports him back to that place.
Okay, so this one I'm not quite getting because didn't you say it was quiet?
It was quiet, but the sound of the wind, I think there were some sheep close by. There was like a herd of sheep, so you could hear them. And for him, I guess that was enough sound. That's the moment that he wanted to remember. And I thought it was really beautiful because you really recognize being present, like really taking in everything. It really makes you very aware of what's going on. And so sometimes I'm somewhere, even here in Canada, or sometimes I'm somewhere traveling and I notice some sounds that I'm hearing and I wish that I would record it.
It's a really interesting idea. I think there must be something to it. So, and I mentioned earlier on one of the podcasts, I ran every street in Kitchener. Mm-hmm. And often when I did that, I was listening to a podcast or listening to music. So the streets I run all the time, this doesn't happen. So on my normal routes. But if I'm out on a street that I almost never run, it's not unusual for the exact podcast episode to get back in my head, or the song I was listening to when I ran there get back in my head. I'm not trying to, it just happens. So I can't help but think. And we know that smells bring back memories.
Definitely.
But I've never actually thought about recording a sound as it being, because, maybe if we take videos, there's some audio to it, but we're more focused on the video.
Yeah.
But it is a really interesting concept.
I thought it was so interesting, and it would require a lot of concentration to listen to that sound and just focus on it and then transport yourself back to that moment. I think it's a really mindful practice.
I suppose, though, if all you're recording is sheep or some birds, that's harder. But if you're recording people laughing and telling a story, I bet you that brings you right back. Like, let's say if that was in the castle and there was 3 people and somebody was laughing and someone told a joke, and you remember the color of their hair, what they were wearing, the way the sky was.
Oh, definitely. And he did do that sometimes as well. We had a rooftop where we would hang out, and sometimes I think we had a couple parties there. There was Canada Day while we were there, so we had a Canada Day celebration, and he brought it out and he was recording the music, the sounds of people talking and laughing and dancing. And I think it would really transport you back to that moment, kind of like a smell would or like a photograph would, but in a very mindful way.
I wonder how he saves it. It's easy to have your Photos app on your MacBook Air or whatever, but I guess maybe he just saves them all in a folder and then just randomly plays them. Who knows?
I guess so. Yeah, we'd have to reach out and see how he's doing it, but he said that he had done it in many different places around the world. So a pretty incredible memorabilia, I guess.
Well, it's a really cool story, and I'm glad you were able to tell us.
Yeah, thank you.
Guests are giving their time, expanding our minds. Today's interview is in the category of mental wellness. It's a reality of life that we will each see people we love pass away, and we will go through a grieving process. I reached out to Hospice of Waterloo Region to connect. I hope to learn more about this topic. And I was told about interesting programs, and today we're talking about one of them. People who are grieving meet at a local park to walk together. Theresa Horan volunteers with Hospice of Waterloo Region. She's a facilitator with this walking program. Welcome, Theresa.
Thank you.
Theresa is a retired educator who's been volunteering with Hospice of Waterloo Region for 9 years. So, Theresa, let me start by asking you about how you became a volunteer with a hospice in the first place.
Well, when I retired, I was looking for things to do that would be worthwhile. And a friend of mine had been volunteering with Hospice of Waterloo Region. And so I thought about it and thought that might be something I would enjoy doing as well and might be able to contribute something. So there's training that's offered through Hospice of Waterloo Region periodically. When they need new volunteers, they offer the training. And just so people understand, it is quite intensive, the training. The volunteers are well trained. It's 30 plus hours, and there's lots of screening that happens as well. So we met, I believe it was weekly. It's quite a while ago now that I went through the volunteer program, but about 30 hours worth. And then I began to volunteer. And there's several ways that one can volunteer with Hospice of Waterloo Region. And I have done other things as well, but I've kind of landed with the Bereavement Walking Group and have been enjoying doing that for a number of years.
Well, what are some examples of some of the other things that volunteers do?
They're all important programs, but a very worthwhile one is often volunteers walk with people when they're at the end of their life and offer, really it's support for the family that's supporting the person who's dying. You can be involved in a one-on-one relationship with someone who is palliative, and there's a number of different ways that you can support the family, whether it be by visiting with the person so that the main caregiver has some time to do other things. It can be picking up groceries for the family, perhaps spending time with the children if there are children involved. You could also do some driving if people need help getting to and from their appointments. There's also volunteers that volunteer right in the residential hospice and doing the similar sorts of things, getting drinks, making lunch, giving a break to the family members that are there. Often people at the end of their life need a lot of care, and it's good to be present with them when they're awake. So it's a lot of stress on the family members that are involved. So it's good to have volunteers that can fill in for part of that. They also have programs like Therapeutic Touch, sometimes just to relieve some stress in the family member or the person themselves that is struggling with the illness. So there's many, many opportunities through Hospice of Waterloo Region.
In your experience, what are some of the feelings and issues that people are dealing with in the grieving process? Now, I'm thinking more of the family members as opposed to the person who's got the illness.
Right. Well, what I hear often from people who are grieving is that in the initial stages when someone dies, there's usually quite a bit of support. People rally around the grieving individual and try and help in the best way they can, the family and friends of the person. But eventually, for the family and friends, life goes back to normal, and the person who's grieving is left with their grief on their own. And so what I've often heard people say is that once family has gone back home or are no longer available to help, they're just looking for someone to spend time with who really understands what they're going through. And people that haven't experienced a loss in their own lives sometimes struggle with how to support a person who's grieving. And so gathering a group of people together that are grieving at the same time, people talk about how wonderful that is for them and how supportive it is and how great it is to talk to an objective individual. In other words, not somebody who knows them at all, but is also experiencing grief. Some of the people who come to us have moved from another area to be closer to their family, either because of the illness or because of retirement or whatever. And so when one of the partners passes away, one of the spouses, then the person who's left is often quite alone because their family goes back to work, as I say, and they've left their friends in another part of the province. And so they're looking to fill some time with people that have like experiences with them.
Let's turn to the program that you help guide up. Tell me a little bit about that. Who are the participants and how do they get involved and what do you do?
The way you get involved with a bereavement walking group is to contact Hospice of Waterloo Region. Probably the easiest way is to go to their website and give them a call. And the intake person at Hospice interviews them, has them complete some paperwork, that sort of thing, and then they're good to go. Now, it's important to understand it's not really an exercise group. It's to be more of a reflective, contemplative walk. So it's not an exercise program. So it's not about how many times you can do the loop. It's about walking and talking and sharing, what their week has been like, whether there's been some significant highs or lows in their time. It's absolutely wonderful to see the relationships that develop with the people that are grieving. And often after people have been walking for a while, you can tell they're really looking forward to seeing one another. And often people will walk together and the volunteer joins them, but often the conversation is going on independent of the volunteer. that we strive to have one volunteer for 2 walkers, and that usually works out, but sometimes there's more walkers than that, and sometimes there's less.
In other interviews, we've heard several people say, especially in the context of a parent talking to a child, that some great times to have those conversations is either driving, when you're both looking forward and you're beside each other, or walking, where you're beside each other, you're not really looking at each other. And it seems to be a way where kids seem to be more free to talk than where they otherwise might not. So I can't help but wonder if that kind of dynamic maybe is at play too, when people are walking beside each other, maybe they open up a bit. Have you noticed anything like that?
I think that is definitely part of it. However, we do also at the end of the walk sit at a picnic table or stand in a circle and just continue the conversation. That's a nice way to end the group too, because then if you've been walking with 1 or 2 individuals, sometimes then you get seated with a different pair of people and you talk to different people. And sometimes the conversation is among the entire group, which is interesting as well. And it's a way for people to get to know others within the group that they haven't had a chance to walk with yet. So, but definitely the contemplative walk, my preference is the spring and fall, really. Sometimes when it's very, very cold, you struggle with getting out there and getting those woolies on so that you stay warm. But really, once you start walking, it really is, people open up, and it's a wonderful way to share what they're experiencing at the time.
And do people tell you what they get out of it, how it helps them?
They often do share. What I believe is that the value of the group is so that they are sharing like experiences. Like they talk about, it's nice to have people that also understand what they're going through. Because I unfortunately, a grieving person does come across lots of people who really haven't ever experienced a loss, and people mean well. They don't mean to say inappropriate things, but people report things like, well, it's been quite a while. Aren't you over that yet? Or isn't it time to move on? Or he's in a better place or she's in a better place. And that's not necessarily what a grieving person needs to hear or wants to hear. So they often share those kinds of experiences and talk about things that have happened to them in their grief journey that have been upsetting to them. And a real bond forms. And the program is only a 2-year program. So after you have walked for 2 years, then you graduate. And there have been many groups that have gone on to, we call them the graduates. They've gone on to continue to walk together without the support of the volunteers. And they do terrific things together. They've gone to theaters and really there's been lots of really good friendships that have formed through the bereavement walking group, and the people continue to be supported by one another in the community.
So if I want to avoid making the mistake of something like, well, that was a long time ago, you should be feeling better now, I can appreciate being an active listener would be good, being empathetic is good. Are there any, other types of things, not exhaustive, but what kind of things would be better to say than that?
Yeah, well, what I find is that if you really just listen, some people really want it to be a dialogue. So often people will ask you questions. And one that I often get is, why did you decide to volunteer with this group? Or have you ever had an experience of loss, or that sort of thing? The best thing to do is to just listen. But of course, it can't be a one-way conversation. So I just find it's important to be a good listener, but also to not then turn it around and make it about yourself. So
right. No, we've talked a lot about empathetic listening and active listening, and
yeah,
it
and
sounds
there's a big difference between just answering the question and then trying to turn it back to the other person, as opposed to then starting onto a long diatribe about your own grief journey or things that have happened within your life in the past.
Well, that's great. So we're actually coming toward the end of the interview. Is there anything else you'd like to say about Hospice of Waterloo Region in general, or about the program?
Well, I think it's a fantastic program, and I hope that anybody listening who's struggling at all with end of life issues or grief issues would consider getting in touch with Hospice of Waterloo Region. It is a very, very supportive group. If you're not able to walk, or if you're having mobility issues or that sort of thing, there are other programs that are offered at Hospice. One that's being offered soon is called Navigating the Holiday Season. So you can actually go to Hospice of Waterloo Region on Solstice Way near Rim Park and be part of a group that has that kind of a discussion. And it's very, very beneficial. Then there's readings that are offered for people to do, book suggestions, and that sort of thing. So really, it's a wonderful organization and very, very supportive. And I just would encourage anyone that is feeling alone and lost in their grief that they get in touch with Hospice of Waterloo Region.
Well, that's wonderful. And just so you know, we actually have listeners outside the region, even outside the country. And I would just suggest to those listeners to try and connect with a local hospice and ask if they have a similar program. And if not, and that hospice wants to get some thoughts on how it works at Waterloo Region, maybe they could reach out to Waterloo Region and connect. So here we are, we're at the end of the interview, and we actually ask every guest the same question at the end of an interview. In a context where we all have areas of wellness that are important to us, but not enough time to focus on all of them at any given time, we do essentially what's a mini wellness check-in. So here's the question. Are you currently neglecting an area of wellness in your life? And if so, can you think of even one thing that you could do to try and foster wellness in that area?
Wellness is very, very important to me. So I've recently got a Fitbit, and I've been really, really trying hard to exercise and eat well and sleep well. But honestly, the one I really have struggled with, especially over COVID, is isolation. And I think when you get into a pattern of not ever having to go anywhere, it's easy then to neglect that social aspect of your life. And I would say for me, that's something that since we've been kind of allowed to go back out again, I've struggled a little bit with those social reconnections that kind of were lost over COVID. So that's one that I definitely have been working on.
Well, I hope you make progress. I can tell you, it's funny because I kept opening up and closing and opening up and closing, and you'd think you could go to events and then they'd be canceled again. So I'm a member of a local law association, and we just had a first kind of in-person gathering, and it was a kind of a special night because some awards were given out to people who we respect in our community. And it was just such a wonderful feeling to get back together again. Mm-hmm. And several people commented in days after how great it felt. So I think if you can break free and get back to some social events, hopefully you and the people you meet with will all find it quite enjoyable.
Right. Okay, good.
Well, thank you very much for your time. This is a really important area, and we appreciate your insights.
Thank you very much.
I'm Cameron, and welcome to another installment of The Adventures of the Starving Artist. This week, as you can probably tell, I got my microphone fixed, which means I can get back to all things recording, and the quality isn't hilarious. So that's good news. In addition to getting some gear repaired this week, it was also New Gear Day this week, and that's one of the best days there is. It's like Christmas comes early. This week, I got myself, finally, after way too long, some in-ear monitors. Well, at least I got the ball rolling. Basically, a monitor is something that you put on the stage when you're performing, especially with a rock band, and it fires your own sound back at you, the performer, so you can hear what things are sounding like, make sure you're balanced with your bandmates, make sure you're not yelling, make sure you're in tune, all that good stuff. And it works. But the problem is, especially in a rock band scenario, you're fighting some serious volume. And if your microphones and your monitors aren't playing nicely together, you get that beautiful squealy feedback that everybody loves. To avoid that, one of the ways you can work around it is by using in-ear monitors. And basically, they take the monitor from the stage and instead put it into big fancy headphones that go inside your ears. With me so far? So there are a gazillion different kinds. You can get what are basically just headphones. You can get sort of the next level up, which is the fancy kind that goes pretty far in your ear. And then you can get like the top-notch thing, which is they're molded custom to your ear. And that's what I sprung for this week. So I went to a place here in Ottawa that does the impressions of your ear, and that's kind of what I want to tell you about. It's an interesting experience. If you've ever been swimming and got water stuck in your ear, you've experienced about half of what this is like. You know how things are kind of muffled? You can hear it sort of sloshing around in there if you move your head funny, that sort of thing. It was like that, but turned up to 11. So what happens is, they mix together this putty stuff. Well, first they shove this foam thing so far in your ear you think it's never going to come out again. And then they mix this putty stuff together, and they inject it into your ear. And it's not like it just kind of goes, like the way you'd clean your ears. No. It goes way in there, all the way to the second bend of the ear canal, like really far in there. And it's goopy, right? Like it's like a goop that they put in there. So it feels very strange. It's like a weird pressure, viscous sensation. But it doesn't stop there. While they're doing this, you have to sort of bite on a foamy thing to keep the shape consistent. So you're drooling all over the place, holding a paper towel there. You're doing your best not to. And this goop is in your ear, and it slowly starts to harden, and you can feel it happening. It's such a weird experience. But then, once it's hard enough, after about 5 minutes, they have to pull it out of your ear, and that was a whole different ballgame. It kind of messed with my equilibrium a little bit. Very strange sensation. And then it pops out, and you're like, whoa, I can hear again. And then they do the other side. Very, very strange. But, all in all, it's going to be worth it. About 20 days from now, the in-ear monitors should arrive at my door in emerald green color, which is pretty exciting stuff. I'm looking forward to using them on stage, live, for all kinds of music. Really excited about that. That's my update for this episode. Thanks very much for tuning in. I'm Cameron. This is The Starving Artist. Until next time.
We love our listeners and thanks for joining us. Please help spread the word about Let's Be Well Together podcast. Follow us and rate us on Spotify, Apple, Google, or your favorite podcast platform. Follow us on Instagram at lets.be.well.together and let your friends know about us.
Move that body like we're meant to do. Hey, John, today for Move That Body, I'd like to talk about sleep. I love to sleep, and I actually fall asleep pretty quickly, usually. But sometimes, especially if I'm working late at night, if I work a large amount, like 8-hour shift or 10-hour shift or whatever, it's really hard for my body to calm down. Like, it's been so busy that I can't relax it. And then my mind tends to then think, why am I not falling asleep? Like, why are my legs aching? How can I stop this? So this thing that we were just reading sounds so awesome to try to see if it can help you fall asleep. So I fall asleep pretty quickly. And you?
Not so well. I'm the typical person whose mind spins. And the worst is, I don't know why this happens, but if I'm just about to fall asleep, when you're at that half awake, half asleep state.
Kind of know, because I'm usually just like right asleep, but
it's like you've just fallen asleep. So like you're not really conscious, and then boom, something wakes you up, like a noise or something. Mm-hmm. When that happens, that's the worst for me, because then I just start spinning and I can't get out of it. So I like to, when I see articles that are possibly interesting for the show, I like to set them aside. And this is one I showed you. It's called the 4-7-8 method that could help you sleep. And it came on CNN. It's by Kristen Rogers, and it was put out on Saturday, September 17th, 2022. It's really interesting. I haven't tried it yet.
No, me neither.
Can I just read for a bit?
Yeah.
The 4-7-8 technique is a relaxation exercise that involves breathing for 4 counts. Breathing in for 4 counts. Holding the breath for 7 counts. And then exhaling for 8 counts. 4-7-8.
Right.
What a lot of sleep difficulties are about are people, when they struggle to fall asleep, it's because their mind is buzzing. So this doesn't actually make you fall asleep.
No.
But here's it's supposed to put you in the frame of mind to help fall asleep.
Right.
Okay, so here's some of the stuff from the article. This method doesn't require any equipment. They recommend that when you first start trying it, that you do it while you're sitting up with your back straight. Mm-hmm. And then once you get comfortable with it, you should be able to do it when you're falling asleep in your bed.
Okay.
And during the exercise, you place the tip of your tongue against the ridge of tissue behind your upper front teeth, because you're going to be exhaling through your mouth around your tongue. And you follow these steps. You completely exhale through your mouth, making a whoosh sound. Close your mouth and quietly inhale through your nose to a mental count of 4. Hold your breath for a count of 7. Exhale through your mouth, making that whoosh sound for a count of 8. And repeat 3 more times for a total of 4 breath cycles. What the research shows is that this breathing practice can help activate your parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for resting and digesting, and that reduces sympathetic activity, putting the body in a state more conducive to restful sleep. That was a mouthful.
Very, very much. But I get it, though. And it also says in there that it also gives your mind something to focus on besides the fact that you can't fall asleep. So it helps that, too.
It's a great point, because how many times have we talked on the show, and we will keep talking about bringing yourself back to the moment. When your mind's spinning, and, you know, Sammy talked one time about using your 5 senses, what's something you can see, hear, smell, etc. A lot of times we talk about breathing. It makes so much sense.
Yeah.
That by breathing, especially because you have to count. I also remember reading one time that in the rough spot of a marathon, when you're struggling and your mind is asking you to stop and you're trying to find some way to keep going, one of the suggestions was to start counting your steps, whether it's 8 or 4 or 12, whatever it happens to be. Somehow that uses a different part of your brain. So maybe this ties in with that as well.
Yeah. Because I definitely find that too. Like when I'm on the workout machine or whatever, I find it really difficult if I count. I'm like, okay, I'm going to count to 50, and if I'm not at this level doesn't go down, then I'll go down. And usually it does go down before I get to whatever count I decided. So yeah, no, I agree with that too. That just give your mind something else to focus on.
I got to do this right though, because I have to say I remembered reading this article, and I couldn't remember the exact numbers. I knew it was like 4 or something.
Yeah.
And so at least 3 to 5 times in the last couple weeks, I'm like, hey, I read that article.
Yeah, what is it?
And I'm in bed going, I'm supposed to do something, but I just tried.
Wonder how we can remember 478. 478.
We'll figure it out.
478.
I think by practicing it.
Yeah.
So I'm going to practice it, because it was kind of a failure when I was trying it, when my mind was spinning, because I didn't really know it did help to focus on my breathing. But maybe I can do this. And the other surprising thing is I didn't see it the first time I read the article. I just thought you would just keep doing it till you fell asleep. But it says
just 4 times.
Try 4 and see how that goes.
And the other thing it said is if you can't hold your breath for 7 counts, that you need to reduce it. It's fine. Just make sure you keep that 4, 7, 8.
Kind of the ratio.
Kind of that ratio.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Well, hopefully this helps us.
Yeah. Let's try it and
in the
see
meantime,
what happens.
The normal routine for me is my mind is spinning and I turn and Sheila fell asleep before her head even hits the pillow, and I'm jealous. There's a thought. Popped up while running. It's nice when you find out that there's a definitive, absolute, amazing proof that your theory is correct. There is such a thing, isn't there? So, for example, I was running and I realized I talk about 8 categories of wellness that are important to me. And I often say that it might be different for each of us. Different people might have different categories. Some might have 6. Some might have 10. I don't know. I worked out the 8 that are important to me. They're mental, artistic, environmental, spiritual, physical, intellectual, economic, and social. As you know, because I go on about it all the time, my theory is that if we can figure out the actual activities that foster wellness in each of those areas, which I often call the bullet points, that I can develop a way to do wellness check-ins and try and find balance, try and rebalance myself when I'm feeling off by realizing some activities that I could do to try and get back on track. And that's the whole concept of the categories in the wellness check-in. But of course, who knows? That's a theory. I'm exploring it. We're exploring it. Here's where I realized on my run that it has to be absolutely correct. First of all, there are 8 letters in the word wellness. So that's got to be a huge coincidence. But then more importantly, if you take the number 8 and you turn it on its side, it's the infinity symbol. So there you go. This is a shameless way to suggest that you can get infinite wellness through 8 facets. Proof perfect. It's me. Am I?
Yeah. Just let me say, flip side of the coin. So today we're going to talk about savoring the moment and having some lucky breaks. So this happened in our marriage. The thing we're going to talk about today happened quite a few years ago. Jeremy was just born. So
1989. So
yeah.
And the reason we're talking about it was because I was having lunch with someone and someone told a story and I said, that reminds me of this kind of crazy story. And I told them and they said, oh, you guys should talk about that. And I'm like, oh, I don't know exactly how it fits, but it is a good story. And
it is a good story and it's really fun to savor. And we remember this forever.
We do. And in life, you never know when you get your lucky break. Like, so all of you guys will have a story about a lucky break. Mm-hmm. So this is kind of our lucky break story.
And hopefully it reminds you of yours. So this happened in 1989. John and I lived in Montreal. And a friend of mine, actually my roommate when I was at Les Grands Ballets, was named Isabel. And she lived in Quebec City. She was in the hospital. So we were going to visit her.
And we didn't have a lot of money at the time. This is the time you'll have heard from past shows. We talked about budgeting. This was one of those times. Mm-hmm. We were making decent money working in bars, but we really had to kind of watch our money. Mm-hmm. But meanwhile, I had gone to a bilingual French school when I was a kid. And for some reason, I had seen repeatedly pictures of the Chateau Frontenac.
Mm-hmm. It's beautiful.
And for people who don't live in Canada or know about it, there's a series of kind of key hotels in some of the main cities in Canada that were built by a company. And they're beautiful. And the Chateau Frontenac, if you see a picture of Quebec City, you'll probably see a picture of the Chateau Frontenac. And I'd always wanted to stay there.
Yes. And I had never been to Quebec City.
And it's a beautiful place, especially old Quebec City.
Yeah.
So I said to Sheila, look, I know we don't have a lot of money. And because it's kind of like a flagship hotel, it's expensive. Mm-hmm. But would you mind if we stayed one night? Because we're only going one night. Can we stay in the Chateau Frontenac?
And I was like, sure. But we didn't make a reservation or anything.
Oh, didn't we? I thought maybe because those are way before the days of internets and stuff like that.
Yeah. So we didn't make a reservation. We just went and...
Right. We were going to, if they had one, we would go. If they didn't have one.
Yeah. So we get there and it was kind of late.
It was late. It was going to be, I'm going to say 9 o'clock.
At night, yeah.
Our oldest child at the time was only, a few weeks old?
6 weeks, yep.
6 weeks old. We were tired, so how when you're driving late at night, at that time, our faces were kind of white and looked like you could use a shower, like your hair is kind of flat. And I remember, and Sheila had Jeremy in one of those front knapsacks. Not a knapsack, but the snuggler.
Whatever you could, yeah.
And, so we went up to the desk and I asked if they had a room for the night and they did. And the woman was really nice and I was working on my French. As she was plugging stuff in, she kept looking at Jeremy, looking at me, looking at the computer. Then she'd look at Jeremy, and then she'd look at Sheila, and then she'd look at the computer. And I'm like, what is going through her head?
Yeah, I don't know.
And so she types out this stuff and she says, you know what? Nobody else is going to come here tonight, I don't think. I'm going to upgrade you guys. And so I said, oh my God, thank you very much, because I've always wanted to come here. And I've, this is kind of a dream for me to stay here for even one night. And she said, I'm going to give you the presidential suite.
Yeah. The presidential suite, which, sounds good. But, when you go to cheap hotels, they give you the honeymoon suite. It's not that great. So, I wasn't expecting much.
No, me neither.
No, I didn't. I just wanted to bed. I was tired, go to sleep.
So then I said, oh, well, what's the presidential suite? She goes, it's the presidential suite. It's where President Reagan stayed. It's where the prime minister stays. I'm like, what? And then I just kept my mouth shut because I kept thinking that something bad would happen if I talked.
Yeah.
And anyway, so we worked our way upstairs. She goes, the one problem though is there's 2 wings. There's the bedroom wing and then there's the library wing. You can only get the key to the bedroom wing.
Right.
So we're like, okay. So we go upstairs and sure enough, it's like unbelievable.
Unbelievable. And you go in a door and there's a hallway and there's another 2 doors.
Right.
And then it was like, and they're huge, like fortress doors. So we go in. And
if you look at the outside of the Chateau Frontenac, you'll see that toward the top on all 4 corners are what are these round turrets with windows in them. And this particular one had the best, facing the best direction. When you looked, so if you went to the window, first of all, there was a beautiful big round table in the turret.
Like built into the turret, like, like almost a breakfast nook, but it was like the Knights of the Round Table because this turret is huge.
Right. And you could see the water, the river, and the bridge, and the old city, and the lights were just right. And, part of the issue was we were so tired, we couldn't fully enjoy it all. Especially we being busy, we're coming to see a friend who's in the hospital. We both worked and gone to school, but still we were kind of on cloud nine.
We were just it was absolutely crazy. And the curtains, like these velvet curtains, and the bed was so big that, like they said, you want a crib for the baby. And we were like, no, this bed is big enough for 10 people. And so we had the baby in the bed with us, and we were sleeping, and I reached over just to see if he was, just to, see that he's there, and I couldn't touch him.
Yeah, and meanwhile...
And I freaked out. I was like, oh my God, where's the baby? And I looked over, and he was like another few feet away from us.
And meanwhile, when I reached over for you, you weren't reachable to me. Like, the three of us were so spread out.
Such a big bed. It was ridiculous.
So anyway, you can tell we're still giggling about it to this day. So a few things come to mind to me for this, which is, one, that little thing that person did. Thank you, Chateau Frontenac, and thank you, whoever that
wonderful.
Was. That has been a memory of a lifetime for us, and it really elevated and uplifted us. So thank you for that. And second, we have taken the time to cherish that lucky break. These kind of lucky breaks are so few and far between. What are you going to do but savor them, enjoy them, and thank people who helped make them happen?
Yeah, it was a wonderful experience.
Please remember that we're not providing advice. We hope to inspire you to work towards balance, and we urge you to consult with qualified people if you need advice. The people on the show are speaking in their personal capacities. Their views expressed are their own, and don't represent the views or opinions of their outside contacts, their employers, or anyone else. We try to get things right, but we can't guarantee everything we say is correct, or that the things we talk about will work for you. Let's be well together, and let's be sure to do that in a safe way.
And it's sign-off time. It's Sheila here with John.
Yeah, people are busy this week, so you've got Sheila and John.
Yep, Sammy has some family things going on, and Cameron, I'm not sure, but he wasn't available.
And also our schedule's been a little tight because of things that are happening right now.
Yes. So last week wasn't a great week for me because on Monday, John called me or texted me and said, how you feeling? I'm like, well, I feel great, and I was like, that's a weird question. He wasn't feeling great. He thought maybe he had a little food poisoning.
Yeah, it felt like a little flu-y, but more just like a stomach problem. But the night before, I did feel just the slightest fever too.
Right. So then, of course, Monday night while I'm sleeping, I feel bad. I wake up and I'm like, oh, I feel so sick. I did work that day, but I worked through it. Basically, I was not feeling very good. And so then I was down and out until Thursday.
I know. And I felt guilty because, maybe we got it at the same time, but I think maybe because I got the flu shot about 10 days before, nothing really hit me. It was just kind of there, just very slight, but you got slammed.
Yeah, I was slammed. I was so feverish and stomach flu, and it was just, couldn't eat anything, couldn't drink coffee. If anyone knows me, knows that I can't drink coffee, then
that is not a good thing. I am
not alive. So I had a rough week, but we did end up going up to Collingwood, which was nice, but we also had to go to the hospital a few times as well. So it was a really, really busy weekend. And I also waitressed. I did a Christmas party. So it's been a lot this week. So I'm really hoping that next week we'll have a little bit more time and it'll just be a little bit more scheduled. It's nice to be in a routine. So
That's
you
true.
have, as everything's going on. But what about you, John?
I'm going to talk a little bit about my dad. But before I do, I just want to say it's good that guests share their experiences on the show, including things that are challenging and personal. But another really important thing to remember is that they do that when they're ready and when they're comfortable. And so in my case, my dad made a decision last Friday to stop treatment after many months in the hospital. And he's now in palliative care. And in fact, he's just now being moved to a hospice. And the doctors believe that he'll probably pass away in days, not weeks, is what they said. And I do support his decision. I think he's done something really brave. And I'd like to think I could make the same decision. It's really the focus of what we've been doing the last few weeks, but I hope you can respect it. I'm just not ready to talk about it yet. Right now, my focus is spending time with him. And I haven't really got to the point where I'm figuring things out for myself. And I think I need to give myself some time.
Yep.
Let me just conclude this way. A big part of my book, as I was starting to get in shape, And I started to write things down. A big part of it was realizing how short life is and how we want to really make the most of every minute. And that's why you'll see on some of the podcast material where it says live life in every breath, because that's something I'm trying to understand better and come to grips with. And it really comes into focus at a time like this. But let me just finish by reading a few paragraphs from my book, and then I'll just stop. In the movie The Last Samurai, Ken Wanabe's character, Katsumoto, is asked why he's examining a blossom tree. He answers that a perfect blossom is a rare thing. It wouldn't be a wasted life to search trees for even one perfect blossom. Later in the movie, he is mortally wounded and taking in the last sights of his life. He spots hundreds of blossoms falling off trees, their life spent as they blow in the wind. He realized in his last breaths, perfect. They're all perfect. I mentioned to Sheila that I enjoy crabapple trees because they blossom, so she planted one in our backyard for my birthday a few years ago, and it started to grow. I enjoy taking in the beauty of blossoms in a quiet moment. They burst out from the trees in spring in vibrant color, full of life, and they're gone soon after. We treasure their beautiful yet short-lived presence. To me, blossoms mirror our lives. Each one is imperfectly perfect during its fleeting brush with life, just like I am, just like all of us are.
That is it for today's show. Please try and make wellness a priority.
You deserve it.
If you feel the need to talk to someone or ask for help, please do that.
Accept yourself for the person you are.
So long.
Adieu.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Goodbye.